لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As many of you may know, today is the 12th of Rabiul Awwal. This marks the birth date of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so, to commemorate his life, I have made this video to go in depth about his life. Let's first go into his ancestors. We will start at Ismail alayhi salam, who was the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. These two prophets were involved in building the Kaaba. Now, after Ismail's death, his children had children themselves. Over time, these descendants increased and went on to make tribes. As time passed, however, these tribes stopped worshipping Allah directly and started bringing idols back with them from the different countries they visited. These idols were placed at the Kaaba, which was no longer regarded as the sanctuary of Allah, as Abraham had intended it to be. It was, however, still respected by the Arabs. And this time, the well of Zamzam disappeared beneath the sand. Also, at the time, Qusay, one of the leaders of the Quraysh, became ruler over Mecca. He held the keys of the temple and had the right to give water to the pilgrims, to feed them, to take charge of meetings, and to hand out war banners before the battle. It was also in his house that the Quraysh settled the affairs. After Qusay's death, his son Abdu Manaf, who had become famous during his father's lifetime, took over the leadership of the Quraysh. After him came his son Hashim. It is said that Hashim was the first to begin the two great caravan journeys of the Quraysh, one in the summer to Syria and the north, and one in the winter to Yemen and the south. As a result, Mecca grew rich and became a large and important center of trade. One summer, Hashim went north to buy goods to sell in Yemen. On his way, he stopped in Yathrib to trade in the market, and there he saw a beautiful woman. She was Salma, daughter of Amr ibn Zayd, who was from a much respected family. Hashim proposed marriage to her and was accepted because he was an honorable and distinguished man. In time, Salma gave birth to a beautiful son, and as some of his hair was with white, they called him Shayba, which in Arabic means grey-haired. Mother and son stayed in the cooler, healthier climate of Yathrib, while Hashim returned to Mecca. But he would visit them each time he took a caravan to the north. During one of his journeys, however, Hashim became ill and died. Shayba, a handsome and intelligent boy, grew up in his uncle's house in Yathrib. He was proud of being the son of Hashim ibn Abd Manaf, the head of the Quraysh, guardian of the Kaaba, and protector of the pilgrims. Even though he had not known his father, who died while Shayba was very young. At Hashim's death, his brother Al-Muttalib took over his duties and responsibilities. He traveled to Yathrib to see his nephew Shayba and decided that as the boy would one day inherit his father's place, the time had come for him to live in Mecca. It was hard for Salma, Shayba's mother, to let go of her son with his uncle, but she finally realized that it was for the best. Al-Muttalib returned to Mecca, entering the city at noon with his camel with Shayba behind him. When the people of Mecca saw the boy, they thought he was a slave and pointed at him, called him Abdul Muttalib, Abd being slave. Al-Muttalib told them that Shayba was not a slave, but his nephew, who had come to live with them. From that day on, however, Shayba was always affectionately called Abdul Muttalib. On the death of Al-Muttalib, who died in Yemen, where he had gone to trade, Abdul Muttalib took his place. He became the most respected member of the family, loved and admired by all. He was, however, unlike those Arabs who had given up the teachings of Ibrahim. The well of Zamzam, which disappeared when the Arabs placed their idols in the Kaaba, remained buried under the sand. Thus, for many years, the people of the Quraysh had to fetch their water from far away. However, one day, Abdul Muttalib was very tired from doing this and fell asleep next to the Kaaba. He then had a dream in which he was told to dig up Zamzam. When he woke up, he was puzzled because he did not know what Zamzam was, the well having disappeared many years before he was born. The next day, he had the same dream, but this time he was told where to find the well. Abdul Muttalib had one son at the time, and together they began to dig. The work was so difficult that Abdul Muttalib made an oath to Allah that if one day he were to have 10 sons to help him and stand by him, in return he would sacrifice one of them in Allah's honor. After working for 3 days, they finally found the well of Zamzam. Pilgrims have been drinking from it ever since. The years passed by and Abdul Muttalib did have 10 sons. They grew into fine, strong men, and as the time came for him to keep his promise to Allah, he told his sons about the promise, and they agreed that he had to sacrifice one of them. To see which one it would be, they decided to draw lots, which was the custom of the Quraysh when deciding important matters. Abdul Muttalib told each son to get an arrow and write his own name upon it, and then to bring it to him. This they did, after which it took them to the Kaaba, where there was a man whose special task was to cast arrows and pick one from among them. The man solemnly proceeded to do this. On the arrow he chose was written the name of Abdullah, the youngest and favorite son of Abdul Muttalib. Even so, the father took his son near the Kaaba and prepared to sacrifice him. Many of the Quraysh leaders were present, and they became very angry because Abdullah was very young and very much loved by everyone. They tried to think of a way to save his life. Someone suggested that the advice of an old woman who lived in Yathrib should be sought, and so Abdul Muttalib took his son and went to see if she could decide what to do. Some of the Meccans went with them, and when they got there, the woman asked, "What is the price of a man's life?" They told her, 10 camels. For at that time, if one man killed another, his family would have to give 10 camels to the dead man's family in order to keep the peace among them. So the woman told them to go to the Kaaba and draw lots between Abdullah and 10 camels. If the camels were chosen, they were to be killed and the meat given to the poor. If Abdullah was picked, then 10 more camels were to be added to the lots and drawn again until they finally fell on the camels. Abdul Muttalib returned to the Kaaba with his son and the people of Mecca. They started to draw lots between Abdullah and the camels, starting with 10 camels. Abdul Muttalib prayed to Allah to spare his son, and everyone waited in silence for the result. The choice fell on Abdullah, so his father added 10 more camels. Again, the choice fell on Abdullah, so they did the same thing again and again and again, adding 10 camels each time. Finally, they reached 100 camels, and only then did the lot fall on the camels. Abdullah was saved, and everyone was very happy. Abdul Muttalib, however, wanted to make sure that this was the true result, so he repeated the draw 3 times, and each time it fell on the camels. He then gave thanks to Allah and that he had spared Abdullah's life. The camels were sacrificed, and there was enough food for the entire city, even the animals and the birds. Abdullah grew up to be a handsome young man, and his father eventually chose Amina, the daughter of Wahab, as a wife for him. It was a good match, for she was the finest of the Quraysh women, and Abdullah the best of the men. He spent several months with his wife, but then he had to leave her and travel with one of the caravans to trade with Syria. On his way back to Mecca from Syria, Abdullah became ill and had to stop in Yathrib to recover. The caravan, however, continued to go on its way and arrived back in Mecca without him. On hearing of Abdullah's illness, Abdul Muttalib sent another son, Al-Harith, to bring Abdullah back to Mecca, but he was too late. When he arrived in Yathrib, Abdullah was dead. Amina was heartbroken to lose her husband and the father of the child she would soon give birth to.